In a world split into pieces, the central continent was just a chaotic mess of nations fighting for space. It was a blood-soaked era that looked like it would drag on for centuries. Everything changed when the Nation of Flame decided they wanted it all and launched a massive invasion. They burned through countries like an inferno, setting up a brutal empire in the north. But then a spark of rebellion popped up in the south, a tiny nation called Tehe. It all kicked off on one specific battlefield that would end up changing history. While the soldiers were scrambling, one man sat calmly on his horse amidst the chaos. This was the Tehe army's centurion, the legendary warrior known as the Black Dragon. He wasn't exactly worried. Actually, he looked like he was having the time of his life. He pointed out toward the front lines where his own allies were getting hammered. He started laughing, telling his daughter Sanka that their forces getting routed was exactly what he expected. Sanka just sighed, knowing her father's tactics were always a bit more unhinged than most. She reminded him they were staring down 30,000 enemies and asked if they were really going through with this. The Black Dragon just grinned, saying it was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet of flame soldiers. He dove straight into the middle of the fight, cutting through the enemy ranks like they weren't even there. He kept laughing the whole time, mocking them for being way too weak to put up a real fight. Blood was flying everywhere as he tore through the elite units without breaking a sweat. Word started spreading through the enemy ranks that their top generals were being taken out one by one. A survivor could only stare in pure horror as his massive army crumbled around him. From the sky, the Black Dragon descended like a literal monster. He looked completely unhinged, covered in blood and loving every second of the slaughter. He didn't just use a blade. He tore through them with his bare hands when he felt like it. By sunset, the legend was carved in stone. He decimated 30,000 men with just 100 riders. From that day on, his name echoed across the continent as the Peerless Warrior. He didn't stop there, leading his men forward with unstoppable momentum. They kept charging through the ranks, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. He was the tip of the spear, liberating nation after nation from the Flame Empire's grip. A southern alliance formed around Tehe, and the entire balance of power on the continent shifted overnight. Later that night, the troops settled in around a campfire deep in the forest. The king of Tehe praised the Black Dragon, saying he fought like a fierce war god. But the king looked worried, mentioning that the Flame Army still had their 10 generals, warriors with terrifying power. He wondered if even the Black Dragon could handle them, and offered to share some intel. The Black Dragon stood up, towering over the old man with a dangerous look in his eyes. He asked the king if he actually thought those guys were stronger than him. The king immediately backpedaled, sweating as he realized he might have insulted the wrong warrior. Without a word, the Black Dragon walked off toward a massive boulder near the edge of the camp. He clenched his fist tight. Suddenly, a massive, dark red aura exploded out of him, lighting up the entire forest like an eclipse. The king could only gape in shock at the sheer pressure coming off the man. The Black Dragon just smirked. Fighting the strong was the only thing he actually wanted. He declared he'd devour every last one of them and stay at the peak of the world. He threw a punch. The force was so insane it shattered the rock and sent a shockwave screaming into the sky. The king could only watch in terror, wondering if he was even looking at a human being. The Black Dragon didn't just target commanders. He was a force of nature. He was a man who, in a time of peace, would be nothing but an object of pure terror. But in this bloody era of endless war, there was no ally more reassuring than her father. The soldiers were already celebrating, knowing that when he made a declaration, he meant it. He didn't just want the enemy leaders. He wanted the whole army wiped out. Sticking behind their sharp-nosed captain was easily the safest place to be on any battlefield, even if it was a bit messed up. Senka looked on, nodding that absolutely no one in the camp was afraid of the man who terrified nations. The king of Tehe could only sweat as the warrior stood over him. In his eyes, the man was something beyond mortal. The Black Dragon told them all to shut up. Words were useless out there, they just needed to follow his back. Under the full moon, he promised to show them a sight that no one had ever laid eyes on before. The king finally understood. This man wasn't a human, he was a monster in human skin. To save a continent being devoured by war, the heavens had sent a guardian dragon to stop the slaughter with even more slaughter. After that night, absolutely no one could stand in the way of the Black Dragon as he tore through the world. He single-handedly took down the Pride of Flame, the 10 generals, and the Southern Alliance just kept growing. The map was being redrawn in real time, one bloody victory at a time. Eventually, the evil dragon that tormented the people was dead, and the continent was finally unified under one banner. The king of Tehe declared that from that day on, they were entering an eternal era of peace, free from the shadow of war. Everyone heard the news, The message was loud and clear. The dark age that had choked the continent for so long was finally over. People wept with relief. A peaceful world was supposed to follow. That's what everyone believed. But as the crowds celebrated, the man who won the war stood alone, already out of place in his own victory. Senka watched her father, her expression unreadable as the cheers of the city filled the air. The black dragon turned and walked away, his heavy boots echoing against the stone floor. He knew that in this era of peace, devoid of the struggle he lived for, a man like him had no home. 10 years passed. The world moved on, but the warrior remained stuck in the past. Deep in the forest, under another full moon, he looked up at the stars with a look of pure exhaustion. He couldn't stand it. A world without war was just agonizingly dull. It was killing him. Every time he closed his eyes, all he saw was the battlefield. The blood, the heat, the thrill. He'd even considered starting a war himself just to feel something again. He was that desperate. But if he did that, he'd be destroying everything his daughter and his men fought to build. The thought of the people he loved forced him to vent his frustration elsewhere. He let out a primal scream that shook the trees. Guardian Dragon, Peerless Warrior. They were just hollow titles now. He felt like a complete fraud. He slammed his fists into the ground, calling himself an irredeemable piece of trash. He only felt alive when people were dying. He clutched his chest, admitting that if this was the only life he had left, he'd rather just end it himself. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the silence. Someone had finally found him. He whipped around, eyes widening as he sensed a group approaching. He wasn't alone anymore. Out of the darkness, a unit of armed soldiers stepped into the moonlight, led by a figure he knew all too well. It was Senka. She was older now, but her eyes were just as sharp and determined as ever. The black dragon was stunned. He asked her what they were all doing out there in the middle of the night. She didn't hesitate. She looked him dead in the eye and told him they had come for his life. Behind her, his old comrades drew their swords, the sound of steel ringing out in the quiet forest. The warrior just smirked. He wondered if the king had finally gotten scared of the one man who could break this fragile peace. A dark grin spread across his face. This was exactly the kind of gift he'd been waiting for. His old comrades laugh, mocking his tearful expression. A soldier scoffs at the Peerless Warrior title, calling him useless off the battlefield. They joke that peace has made him weak enough for them to kill. The black dragon looks at them, tears streaming down his face in disbelief. Senka steps forward, declaring the start of their final battle. The soldiers prepare to slay their legendary leader. Senka leads the charge, her resolve as sharp as her blade. The black dragon's crimson eyes narrow as he watches her. He realizes this is how his life was always meant to end, against those who knew him best. A dark, satisfied smirk returns to his face. Igniting his aura, he welcomes the chance to burn his life away in battle. The forest erupts into violence as the Peerless Warrior clashes with his own men. It isn't a betrayal, it's a gift. His comrades, resolved to stay with him even in death, is their final testament. He fights with the same ferocity that unified the continent. This is a funeral rite fit for a warrior, sending him to the underworld in style. Senka watches him, acknowledging that the battlefield is where he truly belongs. She vows to guide him to hell through a path of their own making. A chilling smile crosses her face as she prepares the final blow. She lunges at him with dual blades, cutting through the moonlight. The black dragon is pushed back, finally meeting a force equal to his own. He calls out her name, his voice filled with pride. Their blades clash in a flurry of sparks and steel. He remembers her as a small child, looking up at him with innocent eyes. He recalls the days he spent training her, even when she cried. He thinks back to the quiet moments they shared after the war ended. They had stood together at the dawn of a new era, watching the world change. Now he sees that she has finally surpassed him. He speaks her name softly, as his life blood begins to spill. Senka weeps even as she fulfills her duty, acknowledging her father's strength. They embrace, swords piercing through his chest in a final, loving act of mercy. He thanks her for staying with him until the very end, returning her love. The legend of the Peerless Warrior concludes not in peace, but in the heat of combat. His final moments are spent with the only people who truly understood his soul. They laugh together as they cut each other down, their hearts finally in sync. He holds his daughter close, filling the void in his heart one last time. He departs the world fully satisfied, having felt truly alive at the moment of death. A single ripple marks the end of a chaotic life. Suddenly, a flicker of consciousness returns. Confused, he realizes he should be dead, yet a voice calls out a new name. The nurse smiles down warmly, announcing it's time for milk. The legendary warrior has been reborn as Nero, a red-haired baby. The nurse holds baby Nero, who looks around with wide, surprised red eyes. Time passes, and a maid holds up a white dress against a young Nero, who remains perpetually shocked. Now a few years older, Nero stares intensely at her reflection in a mirror. Outside the mansion, A man practices magic, light sparking from the tip of his staff. From a window, Nero watches the mage training in the garden below. The story shifts to Colony 4, a bustling city formerly known as the Archimedes Magic Kingdom. Nero stands atop the mansion's roof, her red hair and green skirt catching the wind. Identified as Nero Oldrose, she stares out at the world with a solemn gaze. Standing on the edge, she reflects on the impossibility of her situation. The spirit of the black dragon looms behind her, a ghost of her former self. She recalls the preachings of monks about reincarnation and the cycle of suffering. The peerless warrior, once unmatched under heaven, has found a new path. Through a twist of fate, the legendary warrior was reborn as a small girl. Nero walks through the grand hallway, her thoughts heavy with irony. Instead of a pest, she became the young lady of a wealthy mansion. To her, this luck proves that divine justice is a myth. She remembers the satisfaction of her final moments as the black dragon. She has fully accepted her new life and cares little for her change in gender. However, there is one major drawback to her current existence. A group of maids finds her, their faces lighting up with excitement. The maids converge on her, eager to begin their favorite activity. They gush over her cuteness, treating her like a living doll. Nero stands in a frilly red dress, looking completely miserable. The maids immediately start planning her next outfit change. Nero used to be the Black Dragon, a legendary warrior who united an entire continent. Now, he is a tiny little girl, surrounded by maids treating her like a living doll, trying on one dress after another. She's not exactly feeling the vibe. Her warrior pride is taking a serious hit while these women gush over how cute she looks. To cope with her new reality, Nero's discovered the greatest invention of this era: high-tier tea and snacks, specifically donuts. The former legendary conqueror is now officially a sugar addict. Seriously, world peace might be boring, but it definitely tastes better than war. She's half convinced these things are laced with a charm spell because she just cannot stop eating them. The maids are absolutely obsessed with her. To them, she's just the most adorable little lady in the house. They hope she stays this sweet forever, especially since the rest of the Oldrose family is apparently a bunch of nightmares. Nero hears every word. She might look like a kid, but she's already judging everyone in the room. One of the maids mentions her birthday is next month, which means she'll finally get her record. Record? Nero's got no clue what that even means. Turns out, it's a staff that mages use to channel magic. Apparently, even the soldiers in the courtyard use them to fight. Curiosity gets the better of her, so she heads to the window to see what she's dealing with. Outside, the troops are practicing with their staves. In this world, your worth is basically tied to how well you can handle one of those. The next day, she's out for a stroll with a book, playing the part of the perfect little noble girl. She takes a break on a bench, sighing at how much effort the maids put into turning her into a doll. Her inner warrior starts wondering what these people would do if they knew she was actually a lawless barbarian inside. The dragon is still very much alive in those red eyes. She watches a mage fire off a bolt of energy. It's a weird system. You can't even use magic without one of those sticks. Nero goes back to her book, trying to wrap her head around how this society works. This civilization is way more advanced than her old world, but the core of it hasn't changed at all. Beyond the pretty gardens and white walls, people are still being beaten and broken. The strong are still preying on the weak, and they're doing it with a massive, arrogant smirk. It's all ruled by the great magical nation of Central, the powerhouse currently running the show. This place used to be a kingdom, but after losing to Central, it was renamed Colony 4, and its people were reduced to slaves. Anyone caught resisting is treated like trash, left begging for mercy while the mages laugh. Seeing this kind of one-sided violence actually makes Nero feel a bit nostalgic. She cracks a tiny grin. War, oppression, cruelty. It's the same old story no matter what world you're in. Her moment of peace is interrupted when her father, Cloud Oldrose, approaches to check on her. Cloud is joined by her older brother, Rox. They're the definition of high-end mighty nobles who think they own the sun. Nero puts on her best good girl act and tells them she's just studying the country's history. Cloud points out the window at the broken resistance fighters lying in the dirt. He tells her it's a lesson. This is exactly what happens when inferior breeds try to defy their betters. Rox chimes in, bragging about their status as honorary centurions who are way above the common trash. In this society, if you're not at the very top of the pyramid, you're basically a slave. Nero's family secured their ruler status through negotiations during the war, making them the masters of Colony 4. Outside, a soldier grinds his boot into a rebel's back while the family watches. The guard tells the guy not to get cocky. It's brutal, even for a civilized nation. The man on the ground is literally crying and begging for mercy, but no one's listening. The mages start blasting the survivors just for the fun of it. Their lives aren't worth a damn to these people. Rox starts laughing his head off, saying the rebels sound like croaking frogs. Cloud joins in, finding the whole dream of liberation thing hilarious. They have no idea who they're really laughing in front of. Cloud finishes his lecture, reminding his kids that Central is absolute and the Oldro's name is everything. He expects total obedience from both of them. Rox is all in, but Nero just gives a quiet, dutiful response to keep her good daughter disguise intact. As the family walks off, Nero stays behind on her bench, her mind stuck on that word her father used. Resistance. She stares off into the distance. To the rest of the world, a resistance is just a group of failures, but Nero knows better. She thinks back to her past life as the Black Dragon, where she didn't just resist an empire. She tore it apart from the front lines. A dark smirk creeps onto her face. For a warrior like her, those blood-soaked battlefields were the only time she ever felt truly alive. Cloud and Rox suddenly stop dead in their tracks, their faces going pale as they feel a sudden, bone-chilling wave of terror. Nero just starts walking, her small shoes clicking against the grass as she hides that terrifying aura behind her innocent appearance. She strolls past them with a book in hand, her red eyes gleaming with a nostalgia for violence that her family can't even begin to comprehend. Fast forward 1 month to Nero's birthday. Instead of cake and presents, the mansion is echoing with her father's furious screaming. In the center of the grand hall, Nero stands alone holding a magic staff, while her family stares her down like she's a criminal. Cloud, Rox, and Lady Oldrose all look absolutely horrified, their faces twisted with a mix of shock and pure disgust. Nero just tilts her head, genuinely wondering why everyone is throwing such a fit over a simple test. Cloud is screaming his lungs out. He can't understand how she can stand there looking so calm after what just happened. Nero didn't flinch at all and asked her father why he was so angry. Compared to the armies she had once faced, his rage didn't bother her in the slightest. She calmly points out that all she did was fail to activate the record, which to her is just a fancy stick. Cloud yells that failing to use the staff means she has zero magic. And in this world, that's a death sentence for their reputation. He tells her that without magic, she's ranked lower than a slave. To him, his daughter is no longer a human being, she's an embarrassment. Lady Oldrose and Rox look just as repulsed. They're not worried about her, they're terrified of the shame she'll bring to the family name. Cloud decides on the spot that they'll just tell the world their daughter died in a tragic accident. It's a clean way to erase their failure. He looks down at Nero with cold, dead eyes, already treating her as if she's already gone. Lady Oldrose and Rox quickly jump on board. For them, faking her death is the only way to save their social standing. Rox decides he wants to be the one to handle the accident personally, reaching into his pocket with a nasty grin. He pulls out a glowing magic stone, taunting Nero and calling her a worthless failure who doesn't deserve to live. He charges up his magic, aiming right at his little sister's face with every intention of killing her where she stands. But Nero doesn't look like a victim. She looks at her brother with a chillingly calm expression that says he's made a massive mistake. As the legendary warrior's aura finally explodes outward, she gives him a terrifying, red-eyed smirk and asks, "Kill me?" "You." Rox Oldrose pulls a magic record from his pocket, ready to show off. He laughs, mocking Nero for her lack of talent, as a green glow surrounds him. Rox aims his staff, his eyes wide with a manic grin as he vows to kill his own sister. Nero doesn't flinch, meeting his gaze with a predatory smile that makes her red eyes glow. The arrogance on Rox's face instantly evaporates into confusion. The little girl clenched her fist, delivering a powerful blow that shattered the magic staff in his hand into pieces. A massive, terrifying red dragon manifests behind her, dwarfing everyone in the room. Rox is completely paralyzed, his face paling as he realizes he's in over his head. Nero mocks him, asking if he's done telling jokes. Terrified, he scrambles backward, begging her to stay away. In a desperate panic, Rox fires a burst of green magic from his staff. The green energy surges forward, aimed directly at the little girl. Nero shifts her weight in an instant, her feet blurring across the floor. She effortlessly ducks under the blast, moving faster than the eye can follow. Nero lunges forward and catches Rox midair, cutting off any chance of escape. She slams him into the wooden floor with a bone-jarring impact. Cloud Oldrose and his wife watch in absolute horror at the sudden turnaround. Dust fills the air as Nero pins her brother to the ground, her fist raised. Rox chokes out a plea for her to wait, his face battered and bloodied. Nero just smiles and tells him she won't. The redhead starts pummeling his face, each strike landing with heavy, dull thuds. Rox can't even scream properly, only making pathetic gagging sounds as the beating continues. Nero calls him a fattened pig, mocking his pathetic attempts to defend himself. Suddenly, a blue magic beam streaks across the room to intervene. A massive explosion of green energy erupted, but Nero had already grabbed her brother's body and used him as a human shield to soak up the full force of the attack. Cloud stands his ground with his staff raised, looking for his son through the smoke. The noble grits his teeth in shock, realizing Nero has vanished from where she should have landed. Rox lies on the floor, unconscious and bleeding from his mouth. The boy is out cold, leaving his father to deal with the threat alone. Cloud frantically looks around, his blue magic staff glowing as he tries to find his daughter. He realizes too late that he made a rookie mistake. Nero drops down from above, mocking him for lowering his guard during a duel to the death. Cloud manages to activate a shield just as she reaches him. The girl's eyes narrow, focusing on the shimmering blue barrier. She lands gracefully on top of the hexagonal grid, looking down at her father. A massive blue dome surrounds Cloud, supposedly his ultimate defense. This barrier is a legendary power, famous for establishing the dominance of mages in ancient wars. It's said to be strong enough to deflect cannonballs when cast by a master. The man smirks, confident that his shield is far beyond the reach of a magicless failure. Nero just smiles back, finding the concept of an ultimate shield amusing. She takes a step forward, her presence alone cracking the air around her. Nero slams her fist down, and the supposedly impenetrable barrier shatters like glass. Cloud's face twists in pure shock as his supposedly impenetrable shield begins to crumble under the child's fist. In Nero's past life, magic was a myth, something that simply didn't exist. Instead, warriors mastered Senki, a physical energy circulated through the body to gain superhuman traits. They were known as warlords, living weapons capable of unleashing absolute havoc on the battlefield. Among them stood one man who rose above all others, slaughtering countless enemies to become a peerless legend. Cloud stares up from behind his failing barrier, trembling as he realizes the girl he called incompetent is anything but. Nero acknowledges that her current body might not be able to project magic like a normal mage, but she realizes that magic and Senki are remarkably similar in how they flow through the soul. Even in a new body, she couldn't possibly forget the power that defined her entire existence. She spent decades perfecting this strength, a lifetime of combat etched into her very spirit. With a sudden surge of red aura, she punches straight through the blue barrier, sending shards flying everywhere. Cloud watches in horror as the tiny girl's fist closes in on his face. Lady Oldrose stands frozen, her hand over her mouth as she witnesses her husband's defeat. Nero looks back with a terrifying, blood-soaked grin, her red eyes burning with the thrill of the hunt. She walks calmly toward her downed father, the ground cracking with every step. The noble Cloud can't process the fact that he, a powerful mage, was just dismantled by a failure. Nero doesn't give him a second to breathe, launching herself into the air for another strike. She landed a brutal kick squarely on her father's face, caving it in, with the impact of the blow echoing throughout the room. Cloud lets out a choked scream as she continues the assault without a hint of mercy. The impact creates a massive crater in the floor, sending debris flying everywhere. Her mother can only watch, shaking like a leaf as she sees the monster her daughter has become. Nero stands over the unconscious body of her father, looking down at the broken man. She lands one final, heavy blow that leaves him a bloody mess on the floor. Lady Oldrose finally finds her voice, screaming for her daughter to stop this madness at once. She threatens to call the guard mages, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. Nero just glances over her shoulder, completely unfazed by the threat of reinforcement. The mother stops short, confused by the absolute lack of fear in the child's eyes. Nero wipes the blood from her face and points out a very inconvenient truth for the family. She explains that if the world finds out the great Lord Oldrose and his son were beaten by a little girl, their reputation would be shattered, and the whole family would likely be demoted to slavery for the disgrace. She gives her mother a chilling smile, telling her to go ahead and call the guards if she's willing to lose everything. The lady realizes she's been completely cornered by her own daughter. Slavery would be a fate far worse than death for a proud noble of their standing. Nero watches her mother struggle, knowing exactly what's going through her head. A flash of her past life, as the black dragon reminds her of why she loves the thrill of a fight to the death. While she'd love to test herself against real mages, she knows she has to stay her hand for now. The black dragon's life ended in solitude because he knew nothing but war, and she doesn't want that again. If she loses herself to that bloodlust now, she won't be able to face the people she once cared about. She steps off her father's body and addresses her mother with a cold, formal tone. She decides to enjoy this second life to the fullest, but on her own terms. She wants to learn about this new world and grow as a human being, away from her family's shadow. With a sharp look at the terrified woman, Nero mentions she has one small favor to ask. Nero reflects that if her only place in this life is on a battlefield, then she will embrace conflict once again. Covered in blood, she smiles down at her defeated father, Cloud Oldrose, asking if he'll finally grant her request. Standing over the broken man, she vows to walk a new path as Nero Oldrose. A month passes, and the scene shifts to a rowdy classroom filled with rough-looking students. The atmosphere is thick with tension as the boys loiter on their desks, looking for trouble. These aren't typical scholars. They carry the hardened look of street-smart delinquents. The heavy wooden door creaks open, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Nero steps inside, looking far more refined than her surroundings in her new school uniform. The students' tough facades instantly shatter as they stare at her in complete shock. To the confusion of any onlooker, the rowdy boys jump to their feet and bow in unison, greeting her as their boss. Nero can only smile at the absurdity of it all, wondering how she managed to take over so quickly. In this world, magic is the ultimate standard, a power most people are born with. Society is strictly tiered, with everyone ranked from S to F based on the amount of mana they possess. A chibi version of Nero points out the hierarchy, where B ranks are honorary nobles while those at the bottom are treated as slaves. Mana growth typically peaks at age 15, leaving little room for improvement after childhood. Because of this, children are sent to grand academies at the age of 12 to master their magic. Students who reach B rank by graduation are guaranteed a life of prestige and luxury. These honorary centurions are given a higher-level education to prepare them for leadership roles. Only the elite are allowed access to the most advanced magical studies. Nero knows none of this applies to her, given that she can't release a single drop of mana. This led her to Drawa Magic Academy, a repurposed prison that serves as a school for the discarded. The halls are cold and damp, a stark contrast to the grand spires of the prestigious magic schools. Since its founding, not a single student from Drawa has ever managed to rise above the rank of a commoner. It's a dumping ground for future slaves, the absolute bottom-of-the-barrel institution in Colony 4. Nero walks down a dark corridor alongside an arrogant middle-aged man in a dark blue robe, the Drawa teacher. Far from being intimidated, Nero finds the prison-like atmosphere quite comforting and familiar. The Drawa teacher grinds his teeth, clearly annoyed by the young girl's nonchalant attitude. He stops in his tracks, his back turned to her as he tries to maintain his composure. Suddenly, he reaches back and grabs the top of Nero's head, his face contorted with malice. He sneers at her, calling her a useless brat and telling her to wipe the smirk off her face. He explains that the children in this school are total scum, the worst of the worst. A dark silhouette looms behind them. Risen, a student so wild that even the teachers can't handle him. Instead of showing fear, Nero's eyes glow a deep, predatory red as her smile remains. The teacher taunts her, imagining the joy the other trash will feel when they target a noble loser like her. Nero finds the idea of being targeted by the school's deadliest delinquents to be incredibly entertaining. She politely asks the teacher to remove his dirty hand from her hair, her tone dripping with hidden threat. Before the man can react, she reaches up and grips his hand with a strength that defies her small size. The teacher lets out a blood-curdling scream as a surge of dark energy pulses through his arm. He tries to pull away, but his hand feels as if it's been fused to the girl's head. Panic sets in as he realizes he's completely trapped by the child he was just mocking. His face pales with terror, sweat pouring down his forehead as he stares into Nero's cold gaze. Nero's tiny hand remains locked onto his, proving that she is the one in control of this prison. The Drawa teacher collapses onto the stone floor, his body trembling as Nero looms over him in the dimly lit hallway. He stares at his hand in disbelief, wondering how he could have felt such immense pressure when there isn't a single mark on him. Nero extends a helping hand toward the fallen man, her voice dripping with mock concern as she asks if he's all right. She gives him a closed-eyed, innocent smile, teasingly remarking that he looks like he's just seen a ghost. The teacher is paralyzed by fear, his face turning a sickly shade of blue as he realizes the true nature of the girl before him. Scrambling to his feet, he practically runs down the corridor, desperate to put some distance between himself and Nero. Nero watches him go, silently pleased with the results of her research into this particular academy. She recalls the moment she blackmailed her mother, Lady Oldrose, who was already on the verge of a complete breakdown. Standing in the middle of a literal bloodbath, the young girl had smiled and asked her mother to grant her a small favor. Lady Oldrose could only stammer in terror, asking what she had to do to survive this nightmare. Nero's request was simple. She wanted to be enrolled in a magic academy immediately, with the day's events kept a total secret. Her mother tried to argue that she was far too young, as the typical enrollment age was 12. Standing atop her father's unconscious body, Nero pointed out that noble influence can easily bypass such trivial rules. Lady Oldrose was horrified to learn that Nero specifically chose Drowa Magic Academy, a place with no entrance exams and a terrible reputation. Nero simply smiled, deciding that a trash heap full of lowlifes was the perfect place for her new life. The noblewoman clutched her head in despair, unable to comprehend why an Oldrose would want to associate with such filth. Looking at her son Rox's battered body on the floor, she realized she had no other choice but to comply. The fear of suffering the same fate as her husband was enough to completely break her will. Trembling and exhausted, she asked if this was truly all Nero wanted from them. Nero promised that once she was enrolled, she would never bother her pathetic family ever again. Back in the present, Nero hums to herself, glad to finally be free from the stifling atmosphere of the Oldrose estate. The terrified teacher finally stops in front of a heavy wooden door, announcing that they have arrived at her classroom. Nero peeks into the classroom with a sweet, innocent smile on her face. Inside, the room is packed with rough-looking teenagers lounging on their desks and staring her down. The entire class goes quiet as they realize a new student has just arrived. A blonde student sitting on his desk speaks up, asking what a pipsqueak like her is doing there. Nero isn't bothered at all. She actually thinks a room full of thugs is absolutely wonderful. She walks right to the front of the room and comes to a dead stop. With a polite bow, she introduces herself as Nero Oldrose and says she's looking forward to learning with them. The name hits them like a truck. Every student in the room is visibly shocked. They start heckling her immediately, demanding to know why a noble brat is at a prison academy. They tell her to go play house somewhere else and stop treating their school like a cesspool. Nero just thinks to herself that this dump actually suits her way better than a stiff noble house. She narrows her eyes, wondering where that dangerous guy the teacher mentioned is hiding. She scans the shouting crowd, dismissing the loudmouths one by one. Her eyes land on a blonde guy sitting quietly in the back, leaning against the wall. He stares back at her with a sharp, unfriendly gaze that stands out from the rest. A dark smile spreads across Nero's face as she wonders if he's the one she's looking for. Before she can find out, another student pulls a knife and calls her Shorty, threatening to carve up her face. Nero doesn't even flinch. She just tells him his eyes look lifeless and boring. The guy loses it and starts screaming as he raises his hand to strike. He didn't stand a chance. Nero delivered a slap so powerful that it sent him spinning backward. The rest of the class can't believe what they're seeing. Their jaws are practically on the floor. He crashes into the desks with a heavy thud. Nero just looks down and calls him pathetic. She tells the class they're all bark and no bite, which is why people treat them like trash. That sets the whole room off. 3 guys jump up, ready to tear her apart. They all lunge at her at once, one of them leading with a blade. Nero just smirks, clearly enjoying the chaos she's created. She moves like a blur, kicking one guy so hard he's pinned against the blackboard. She steps over another fallen student, sighing about how boring their big talk turned out to be. She holds out her hand and tells them she'll just have to teach them a lesson herself. The students are sweating now, completely intimidated by the little girl. Suddenly, a boot slams onto a desk near the front of the room. It's Risen. He stands over his classmates and yells at them for being scared of a single kid. One of the students tries to warn him that there's something seriously wrong with her. Risen isn't hearing it and shuts the guy up with a quick punch to the face. He turns his attention to Nero, looking genuinely annoyed that his peace was disturbed. He starts to channel his magic, a golden aura flaring up and surrounding his entire body. Nero's actually a bit surprised to see a C-rank mage in a dump like this. His buddies start bragging, calling Risen a genius who only ended up here because of a bad record. Nero looks away for a second, processing what she just heard. Then she looks back at him with a mocking grin, calling him a big fish in a small pond. That's the final straw. Risen's face turns red with fury. He cracks his knuckles and glares at her, promising to crush her right then and there. As Risen lunges at her, Nero just casually mentions that the classroom is way too cramped for a real fight. She doesn't even bother with the door. She just smashes right through the window. The delinquents can only watch in total disbelief as their new classmate takes a dive out of the high-rise building. Nero falls gracefully through the air, challenging them all to follow her outside if they've got the guts. Risen and his lackeys rush to the broken window, staring down at her with pure confusion and shock. Nero lands perfectly in the courtyard below, barely breaking a sweat. She looks up and beckons them with a mocking gesture, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. The students are left wondering what kind of monster they just let into their school. Risen stands at the window, trembling with rage as he vows to kill her for making a fool out of him.